The old man stood frozen, his gaze locked on the wreckage that had once been his barn. The sight of it, crumpled beams, shattered wood, and debris scattered across the ground, filled him with a deep sense of panic. His heart raced as he tried to comprehend the destruction before him. Not only was the barn in ruins, but the goats he had painstakingly raised were nowhere to be found. Each of those animals had been a source of hope, a chance to sell them at the market and make a small fortune. But now, everything was lost. His body, once sturdy despite his age, seemed to give way beneath the weight of the disaster. He collapsed, overcome by a sense of helplessness and defeat. This was not just a loss of property or livestock, it was the shattering of a dream he had held close for years. Later, lying weakly on his bed, the elderly man was surrounded by the concerned faces of his daughter and grandchildren. His thoughts lingered on what could have been. The goats he had intended to sell were not merely a means of survival. The money was destined for something greater, a donation to the Gongdong Sect. Though his family had little, he had always dreamed of giving back to the sect that had once inspired him. It had been his lifelong ambition, a goal he had worked tirelessly to achieve, despite their poverty. Tears welled up in his eyes as he lamented the cruel twist of fate that had taken it all away in an instant. His voice, though frail, carried the weight of years of dedication. The dream he had nurtured, the sacrifice he had planned, was gone, snatched away by the devastation that had befallen his barn. His grandson, Youngsik, however, did not share the same reverence for the past. The young boy's temper flared as he heard the elders lament, unable to understand why his grandfather still clung to the idea of donating to a sect that had long since fallen into ruin. To him, the Gongdong sect was a distant memory, a relic of a past that no longer mattered. In his anger, Youngsik stormed out, bitter and frustrated. The mother, startled by Youngsik's outburst, could only murmur in shock at her son's disrespect. Yet the old man, lying frail on the bed, understood the boy's frustration. He knew that to the eyes of his young grandson, he must seem weak, a man bedridden and powerless to change the world around him. But the elder's heart remained tied to the past, to a time when the Gongdong sect had been a beacon of hope in Gansu. Once it had been the finest sect in the region, offering dreams and aspirations to a poor boy like himself. Back then it had been something grand, something worth believing in. But now, with the invasion of the demonic sect, all of Gongdong's teachings had been swept away. What remained were only fragments of a forgotten era, and the once proud sect was a shadow of its former self. As much as the elder clung to the memories, he knew deep down that the Gongdong sect from his youth might never return. The beauty and strength it had once embodied were lost, perhaps forever. Lee Cheol-soo stood in the center of the training ground, his body poised with precision as he honed his martial skills. The air around him felt charged with energy, a subtle hum of power that had finally settled deep within his core. He could feel the yang energy stabilizing, flowing steadily through his meridians. Yet, despite the progress, something felt off. Every time he attempted to perform the Soyang technique, a lingering discomfort gnawed at the edges of his focus. It was as though the balance within him wasn't quite right. His thoughts drifted back to his past life, where he had mastered the yin-based Gihua technique. Could that be the source of his unease? The opposing nature of yin and yang, the dual forces that govern the very foundation of martial arts, seemed to clash within him. The Gihua technique had left a profound imprint on his soul. And now, even in this life, it appeared to influence the way his energy responded. As he struggled to harmonize the two, doubt crept in. Something was amiss, but he couldn't quite place it. His mind turned to the stories his master had shared with him just the day before, the teachings of the Gongdong sect. The emblem of their sect, the reverse taiji, represented a profound philosophy, the reversal of yin and yang. It was a teaching passed down by their ancestors, symbolizing the ultimate balance between these two opposing forces. Water flowing upwards, fire burning below, concepts that defied the natural order but promised the highest form of life through the perfect union of yin and yang. Lee Cheol-soo remembered how his master had explained that this philosophy was often misunderstood by outsiders. Many saw the Gongdong sect's martial arts as unnatural, even resembling the dark and forbidden practices of the demonic sect. But this was a grave misconception. The sect's purpose had always been noble: to maintain balance and eradicate the true threat of demonic arts. Their techniques, while misunderstood, had never strayed from righteousness. His master's words echoed in his mind, a stern reminder not to be swayed by rumors or the ignorance of others. The Gongdong sect had never walked the same path as the demonic sect, despite the superficial similarities that untrained eyes might see. Lee Cheol-soo understood this distinction deeply. His master had instilled in him the importance of staying true to the sect's teachings, to remain steadfast in their mission. With a newfound sense of resolve, Lee Cheol-soo felt confident in his decision to join the Gongdong sect. The path he had chosen, the Sokdo path, seemed perfectly aligned with the sect's ideals. Here, martial arts were not just for self-defense or personal gain. They were a means to protect the world by slaying demons and eradicating the forces of darkness. This toughness, this unwavering resolve, was the discipline he had longed for. The Gongdong sect's teachings felt like the true calling of a man dedicated to a higher purpose. As he stood there, immersed in his thoughts, the sudden sound of a voice broke through his contemplation. It echoed from the gate of the sect, carrying the desperate cries of a child. The voice belonged to Eunuch, who stood before the entrance, his young face stained with tears as he pleaded for help. His cries were filled with desperation, imploring the Gongdong sect to come to his aid. The boy's voice trembled with emotion as he called for assistance for his grandfather, who had devoted his life to supporting the sect. The urgency in Eunuch's voice could not be ignored. His words cut through the air, invoking the righteousness of the sect and demanding that it live up to its reputation as the greatest and most righteous in all of Gansu. If the sect truly embodied the values it claimed to uphold, then surely it would come to the aid of someone who had been loyal to it for so many years. Lee Cheol-soo, still gathering his thoughts, heard the cries clearly. The situation had caught him off guard, especially in the absence of his master, who was away from the sect at the moment. The timing seemed almost cruel. Of all times for such a desperate plea to arrive, it had to be now, when the guidance of their master would be most needed. Yet, even in his uncertainty, Lee Cheol-soo knew that this was not something they could ignore. The boy's plea for help demanded action. He exchanged a glance with Jinwei, both of them understanding the weight of the moment. While they were uncertain of the full extent of the situation, one thing was clear. They had to step forward and respond. They could not turn their backs on a cry for help, not when the ideals of the Gongdong sect called for them to protect the weak and uphold justice. After hearing Eunuch's account, Lee Cheol-soo considered the situation carefully. The young boy had come all the way to the Gongdong sect with an unusual request. He wanted them to catch whoever had destroyed his family's barn and stolen their livestock. It was not the kind of task usually brought before the sect. Theft was something typically handled by local authorities, and it seemed strange to involve martial artists in such a matter. But there was something in the boy's story that hinted at a deeper mystery. Tears welled in Eunuch's eyes as he explained the events. He spoke of how they had discovered the destruction early in the morning when they went to tend to the goats before taking them to market. What they found was far beyond what mere theft could explain. The barn had been completely destroyed, as if by some unnatural force. It didn't seem like something any ordinary person could have done. And this uncertainty had driven the boy to seek out the Gongdong sect. His family, especially his grandfather, had supported the sect throughout their lives, raising goats with the hope of contributing to its recovery, even though they had so little to give. Eunuch's voice was filled with both shame and desperation as he made his plea. He knew it was bold to come without any compensation or offering, but his concern for his grandfather outweighed everything. His grandfather had always revered the Gongdong sect, and Eunuch believed it was the only place that could help them now, when the local authorities would likely dismiss the incident as a simple theft. Lee Cheol-soo pondered the boy's words, sensing the sincerity in his plea. The destruction described didn't sound like the work of an ordinary thief. Something more was at play here, and the dedication of the boy and his family to the sect struck a chord within him. Despite the oddity of the request, the effort Young-sik had made to come all this way couldn't be ignored. Turning to Jinwoo, Lee Cheol-soo made his decision. They couldn't refuse to look into the matter. While it was not the typical mission of the sect, it was clear the boy believed this was something only they could handle. With a nod, he gestured to his fellow disciple. The least they could do was investigate, if only for the sake of the boy's unwavering loyalty and the support his grandfather had shown to the Gongdong sect throughout his life. Without another word, they prepared to follow Young-sik back to his village to see the ruins of the barn for themselves. As Young-sik led Lee Cheol-soo and Jinwoo to the site of the destroyed barn, the boy pointed out the wreckage, his voice thick with emotion. The barn lay in ruins at the base of a mountain that connected to Gongdong Mountain, its structure completely obliterated. Lee Cheol-soo surveyed the scene with a contemplative eye, noting the location. Being so close to the mountain range, it seemed likely that wild animals could frequent the area. Yet, something about the destruction felt off. His gaze landed on a set of tracks in the dirt. The long, sinuous marks left behind resembled the trail of a snake, but not an ordinary one. Judging by the size and depth of the tracks, whatever had left them was no common animal. It was far larger, almost certainly a demonic creature. The possibility that a giant snake had descended from the mountain in search of food crossed Lee Cheol-soo's mind, and his suspicion grew as he considered the implications. He turned to Jinwoo for confirmation, wondering if any legends or rumors of a giant snake on Gongdong Mountain had ever surfaced. But Jinwoo, experienced and knowledgeable about the area, had never heard of such a thing. If a creature this dangerous had been roaming the mountain, their master would have dealt with it long ago. Still, Lee Cheol-soo couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was at play. The mountain, a sacred Taoist site, was brimming with spiritual energy. Such energy could sometimes cause animals to mutate, turning them into demonic creatures. Yet, if this snake had been lurking for any significant amount of time, there would have been stories, sightings, legends, something. The fact that this was the first time they were hearing about it suggested that the creature hadn't been active for long. A surge of excitement bubbled up within Lee Cheol-soo at the thought. If the creature truly was a demonic snake of significant size, it could provide an opportunity for him to absorb its vital energy, enhancing his own strength. The prospect invigorated him, and he decided they should take on the task of dealing with it. Though Jinwoo hesitated at first, unsure whether they should act without their master's approval, Lee Cheol-soo's resolve was firm. To ignore a plea for help from a resident of Gongdong Mountain, especially one so dedicated to the sect, would only foster misunderstandings about their righteousness. The Gongdong sect had to maintain its image of being just, neither fully aligned with the righteous nor demonic, but always striving to protect and serve those in need. After a brief moment of contemplation, Jinwoo agreed. If there truly was a demonic creature responsible for the destruction, they needed to take care of it before it caused further harm. The decision was made. They would investigate the area thoroughly and search for any traces of the snake while sending Young-sik back to safety. Lee Cheol-soo and Jinwoo ventured deeper into the forest, following the faint trail left behind by the demonic creature. The tracks led them far from the wrecked barn and deeper into the dense woods, where the air grew heavier with each step. Lee Cheol-soo's sharp eyes scanned the ground, quickly identifying where the massive snake had dragged its body through the underbrush. It had clearly devoured the livestock and fled, leaving only broken branches and disturbed earth in its wake. Their pace quickened as Lee Cheol-soo urged them onward, driven by a sense of urgency. The destruction left behind by the creature was evidence of its strength, and the longer they waited, the farther it could slip out of their grasp. Despite his eagerness, Jinwoo's caution lingered in the air, his thoughts still occupied by the absence of their master's guidance. But there was little time for hesitation now. Commoners were at risk, and the Gongdong sect's duty to protect them weighed heavily on their shoulders. As they ventured further, Lee Cheol-soo leaped onto a tree branch, his agile movements helping him get a better vantage point. He carefully scanned the forest floor, following the snake's winding path, but something caught his attention. The tracks, sudden and unmistakable, had stopped. Confusion flashed across his face as he considered the situation. Why had the trail abruptly vanished? Before he could piece together the answer, Jinwee's panicked shout pierced the silence, warning him of imminent danger. Instinct kicked in as a massive shadow loomed from above. The snake, far larger and more menacing than Lee Cheol-soo had anticipated, had been lying in wait among the trees. Its dark scales shimmered in the dappled light, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent intelligence. In a swift, lethal motion, the creature launched itself downward, fangs bared, ready to strike. Lee Cheol-soo barely had time to react. The snake's ambush was calculated, its timing perfect. He twisted his body, trying to avoid the creature's jaws as they snapped shut where he had stood just moments before. The sheer force of the attack sent leaves and debris scattering through the air, and the ground beneath trembled as the massive body of the demonic creature coiled and uncoiled with terrifying speed. In the heat of the moment, as the massive demonic snake lunged toward him, a flash of insight surged through Lee Cheol-soo's mind. His thoughts raced back to the ancient tales of Gongdong Mountain, stories passed down through generations within the sect. One particular legend stood out, the tale of the sword saint Jinwei, who, before venturing into the martial world, had once lost his way on Gongdong Mountain. It was there, amidst the secluded and treacherous paths, that Jinwei had stumbled upon the fabled Guangxiong Danyul. The Guangxiong Danyul, hidden deep within the mountain's heart, was a place of immense spiritual energy. According to the legends, it housed a treasure vault left by the ancestors of the Gongdong sect, containing remnants of the sect's lost secret teachings. Jinwei had rediscovered a portion of these teachings within the vault and consumed an elixir that transformed his abilities, granting him unparalleled martial prowess. As the vision continued to flood Lee Cheol-soo's mind, he realized the connection. For an ordinary beast to transform into a demonic creature of such size and power, it must have absorbed an extraordinary amount of spiritual energy. The snake they were facing had mutated, and the cause seemed clear to him now. If there was a place on Gongdong Mountain where such energy could be found, it had to be the Guangxiong Danyul. The demonic creature must have wandered into that sacred space and, in doing so, absorbed the ancient energy stored within, leading to its monstrous transformation. This revelation sent a chill down Lee Cheol-soo's spine. The snake wasn't just a wild creature turned demonic. It was something far more dangerous, a beast imbued with the very spiritual power that had once strengthened the legendary Jinwei. The implications were dire. If this snake had absorbed even a fraction of that energy, it would be nearly impossible to defeat without relying on all the techniques and strength the Gongdong sect had passed down through the ages. Amidst the fierce struggle with the demonic snake, Lee Cheol-soo found himself gripping one of the creature's massive fangs, narrowly avoiding a deadly strike. His body moved instinctively, evading the serpent's venomous bite as he countered each attack with precision. Yet even in the heart of the battle, his mind raced with thoughts far beyond the immediate danger. This wasn't just a fight for survival, there was something greater at stake. If he could survive this deadly encounter, there was a chance to not only restore his vitality, as the records of his past life had hinted, but perhaps even unlock the Gongdong sect's long-lost secret techniques. The snake's presence, its unnatural power, confirmed that ancient energies were still flowing through Gongdong Mountain. Those energies, once discovered by the legendary figures of the sect, had the potential to elevate a martial artist beyond ordinary limits. The possibility of recovering these forgotten teachings burned in his thoughts, giving him a newfound determination. The records of his past life, the scattered memories that had been gradually resurfacing, spoke of ancient techniques that could reshape the very core of his martial prowess. If the serpent had absorbed energy from the mountain's sacred site, then perhaps that same power could be reclaimed and channeled by someone worthy. Lee Cheol-soo's resolve deepened with each passing moment. The risk was immense, but the reward, The possibility of reviving the lost glory of the Gongdong sect, of rediscovering the techniques that had once made it great, was too tantalizing to ignore.